Okay. What's happening in democracy from the ground, if you will, from a number of very distinguished activists. And we have a great moderator, Sarah Wildman, who is currently the print editor at Foreign Policy magazine. But she has been a very accomplished journalist whose work has been published in outlets such as The Guardian, The Washington Post, and Newsweek. She's been the recipient of multiple fellowships and awards, and we're really delighted to have her. Her writing really shows a deep commitment to the protection and promotion of democratic values. So please join me in welcoming Sarah Wildman as our moderator, and she will introduce the panel. Sarah?
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? It's daunting to follow Yasha. But we have a podcast up with Yasha that went up yesterday, so you should listen in. It's really good. So I have three women here who are actually far, far, far more interesting to listen to than me, and I will try to hang back as much as possible. We're looking at 3 different countries and 3 different cases of civil society and on-the-ground questions of freedom of expression, freedom of movement, freedom of assembly, and looking at the ways in which that's changed over time. All the way to my right, I have Yashua Cao. She's the founder and editor of ChinaChange.org. It's a website devoted to news and commentary related to civil society, rule of law and rights activities in China. I'm actually going to have each of these women introduce themselves with a short few minutes of introduction, and then we'll get into the discussion. To her left is Masih Alinejad, sorry. She is the founder of My Stealthy Freedom, which is now called White Wednesday, a campaign against the compulsory hijab in Iran. And immediately to my right is Maria Kanevskaya, the former director of the Human Rights Resource Center. She's a civil society activist in Russia and human rights lawyer from St. Petersburg. Yashua, I'm going to start with you. I know you wanted to give a couple of minutes to give us an overview, because what I'd like us to do in all of these cases is look at how modernity has changed authoritarianism, and look at a little bit about what it meant to be an activist and looking for these freedoms in the 70s and 80s versus today, and how the internet has made authoritarianism more nimble, but it's also made civil society more nimble. And it's changed very much the way we think about authoritarianism and the way we think about both subverting it. So Yashua, can we start with you?
Yeah, thanks. I would like to, our website writes about human rights and rule of law in the last 5 years in English. If you want to visit, it's ChinaChange.org. So I would like to give you a contour of the civil society forces that have emerged over the last 30 years, the so-called China's opening up and the reform era, and what that has done to the Chinese society and what the government has been doing to take them out. So it's a rather a very broad picture that I hope to situate you guys, so we could think about the aspects and what it all means for the rest of us. So we know that at the end of the 70s, the Cultural Revolution ended, right? The opening up of reform officially started in the 80s. In the 80s, I was in college. There was fervent discussions about China's future, because the lessons of a Cultural Revolution was vivid and painful. People at the time, people were in the 80s when China's economic transformation hadn't taken off yet, but the people were looking into the future thinking, well, we need to move to a different society. China has to change. And at the time, the consensus, whether it's the government or the Chinese people, especially the educated class, the consensus is that, of course, China is going to move to a democracy. Of course, we're going to have freedoms. Look at what Cultural Revolution had done to our country. Look at what we had gone through. So that was the consensus. So there were several student movement confined on mostly on university campuses, but that all led to the 1989 Tiananmen Square movement. How magnificent! But we all know, I didn't have to talk too much about what happened to the Tiananmen Square massacre. But after the crackdown, the tanks running over people and guns shooting people down, we enter into, and we also know what happened around that time to the in Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union. So, but China survived that revolution, the Communist Party, and we are into 90s. We have it's a period where people are very, very disillusioned, very quiet politically. The 98 students were scattered all over the place, and the leaders chased out of country or into prison. So in the 90s, Deng Xiaoping had the Southern Tool in early 90s. So it started, the economic reform took off. So that was pretty much the 90s story. And into 2000s, the internet arrived. With the internet, the arrival of internet, there's the fundamental change is that before the Chinese, they didn't have the right, the opportunities to take part in the political process. They don't have a private media to speak up. So the Chinese people didn't have a voice until the internet came. All of a sudden, you have email groups, you have blogs, you have BBS, you have these message chat groups. All of a sudden, Chinese people find their voice. Especially in the city, you have access to internet. And that really, really changed the society. With it, a lot of the events that would in the past would be local village events or just a small city events confined to, all of a sudden they became national events. Like this young man in 2007, which is the beginning of what we will know as the rights defense movement. That's a magnificent civil rights movement and still ongoing, but coming to an end. I'll talk about that later. But with the internet, these events, the social events of egregious social injustice became national events through internet. So from early 2000s, there's a new strand of people. They are lawyers. In the past, the political resistance were restricted, confined to dissidents and the small groups of accidents. They try to form political parties and that sort of writing articles. But into 2000s, we saw the emergence of human rights lawyers. Their numbers are very small. I mean, their percentage is like 0.0001% among China's now 300,000 lawyers, but they made the big waves. They're changing the country.
Joshua, I'm going to stop you here because I want us to get into this for all of us, the ways in which social media has both strengthened and served as a deterrent for modern dissidents, and looking at the ways in which being a dissident outside the country and inside the country play different roles. And I just want to turn to Masya because I want to make sure we each get a moment to introduce these issues and look at these questions. And each of you have served these movements in different ways over time, both inside and outside the country. And Masya, you've also been an activist for over 20 years. And I'm curious for you as well.
Only 20 years.
I know. Since she was in her infancy. But tell us a bit about how you became an activist, what your first moments were, and at the same time now, how your current activism plays out both in social media and globally.
So let me be honest. I'm 41-year-old, a mother of 21-year-old son. I was a parliamentary journalist in Iran, and I exposed the corruption in Iranian parliament. And instead of getting an award, they kicked me out. And but now the thing that I really want to focus, it's about women's rights and how the government of Iran are really have for 40 years, we, the women of Iran, had the fear inside our heart. But now that is the government fears the women. And it's just happening just because of social media, because of the, the power of social media. Iranian revolution, like 40 years ago, there was a revolution, and the Iranian people were having hope that they're going to have greater political freedom. Instead of having political freedom, which we lost it, we lost our social freedom as well. So I always say that the revolution was actually a revolution against women. We had the right to, choose what we wanted to wear. We had the right to choose our lifestyle, to show our hair, to sing, to dance, and to be a judge. But now we lost all of these freedom as women. As a woman, from the age of 7, you have to carry a fake identity. And there were a lot of, female singers, they were forced to leave the country. Women were judged, like Shirin Ebadi, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, and she was kicked out. And so many other rights that being taken away from women. I myself, in a small village, was the one we had a black and white TV, and I had to listen to those policymakers, to those mullahs, to those politicians. And we never had the chance to be visible. I myself was being told that, your visibility or your identity, if you expose your true identity, then you're going to be in hell, you're like hanging with your hair. So we grew up in this society with like having, feeling guilty inside our heart. But when the internet came in Iran, when social media gave the Iranian women the power to talk about their true self, their identity. Maybe it's so simple for people in the West that a woman, individual woman, talking about the hair, talking about, singing and dancing and publishing the video and, photo on internet can have a huge effect, can make a huge wave inside Iran. So in 2014, as I said that I was a parliamentary journalist and my main focus was about politics, freedom of expression, freedom of speech. But when I left Iran, I just published a picture of myself, and with a caption that every time when I run in a free country and I feel the wind in my hair, it just reminds me of the time when my hair was like a hostage in the hands of Iranian government. That simple picture got a lot of comments from Iranian women envying at my freedom from compulsory hijab. So that time I just found that this is the time that we have to talk about our personal freedom. Maybe in the West people think about nuclear or thinking that the United States is a great enemy of Iran. But the important thing is that we have a cultural war inside Iran, daily war inside Iran. Every day women, when they go out, they have to fight for their personal right. So that is why I decided to launch a campaign called My Stealthy Freedom. And I invited all women to talk about their stealthy freedom, to talk about everything that they were not allowed to talk about it, to talk about everything that they were told that you're banned from doing it. So, that became huge. My campaign now has 1 million followers, and everyone in Iran now talking about it. And as you know, that there are a lot of now women taking off their headscarf in public, which is a punishable crime, and putting that on a stick and waving that in public. Maybe it's a simple act, but that means this is just the first step for the women to take their visibility back, to take the street back. And when women understand that there are a huge number of them and they find each other, they feel empowered to talk about other, discriminatory laws, to talk about the greater freedom. We had Iran protest just a couple of months ago, but the most symbol of Iran protest was a picture of a woman holding her headscarf in public on a stick, and that shows actually that the next revolution is going to be a women's revolution in Iran. And that shows actually the power of women inside Iran, and how now these small acts of protesting against compulsory hijab, empowering the women of Iran and gathering other men and even women who wear hijab to get together and be stronger and gaining their platform back. For 40 years, women were censored. All you see in Iranian state TV, just women in hijab, women in black. For 40 years, you never had the true chance to see the true Iran in our official media. But through social media right now, these are the people representing the true Iran, because we have two Iran.
Masti, I'm going to stop you here.
No, I have to say the other Iran.
Okay.
One Iran is the one that you see Javad Zarif, President Rouhani, with a big smile, nuclear deal. But the other Iran is underground Iran, bearing human rights deal under the nuclear deal and, oppressing the people to talk about it. But through social media now, you will see underground Iran exposing the truth and talking loud.
Maria, and we are unique in this case, in this town, to have a panel entirely of women. So I do want to get into these gendered questions. And obviously in Russia, with the new domestic violence legislation that passed in February of 2017, decriminalizing domestic abuse, there are major issues for women in Russia as well. But I know you really wanted to talk about how civil society has been affected, particularly by the 2012 Foreign Agents Law. But I wondered if you can project backwards a bit and look forwards as well, now that we have had one more election and projecting out for another 7 years under Vladimir Putin. So where do you want to start in terms of talking about that? And was that Foreign Agents Law, and if you can explain the Foreign Agents Law, was it a fulcrum moment for civil society in Russia?
First of all, I would like to thank Freedom House to inviting me on this panel and to support activists all around the world. And I would like to share my personal story. And I saw a lot of similarity with China's example. So I am a lawyer, and I choose human rights field when I was a student of law faculty. So it was my choice to do it as a professional. I represent the third generation of human rights lawyer from Russia. We are not political dissident. We choose this profession as our profession. So I do this job for 18 years as well. And I saw a lot of similarities, as I told, with China. Because yes, we are not so numerous, but we do a great work in Russia. And me as a lawyer, I noticed that in 2004, when our president won his second election, we saw a step-by-step crackdown of civil society. So even in 2004, they implemented new legislation on non-commercial, non-profit organization, and they started to limit this space freedom of association. And you're right, for last 5 and second years, since 2012, they adopted a huge numbers of laws that limited our constitutional rights in every field. For example, you mentioned foreign agent law. They implemented so-called Dmitry Yakovlev law. This law is against adoption of Russian children by American, and all kind of help is prohibited. But this is, in Russia we say you have all those bad laws, but we have no open case. So you have law, but it doesn't implement it, hopefully. And also we got, as a second step, we got undesirable organization law, and we have 14 foreign organizations, most of them are American one in this list. So all contacts in Russia are prohibited by this law concerning providing information about program, receiving money. So this second step after foreign agent law cut off Russian NGOs from foreign funding. So many donors, especially American, they went from the country, they closed their offices. Because Russian activists and NGOs can receive huge fines, and even they can put in prison for 2 years just for communicate by emails or with some foundation that they're in the list. For example, in the list we have like 2 Soros organization, Open Society Foundation, Open Society Institute, we have National Dawn for Democracy, we have Media Foundation and other. Hopefully we will not see Freedom House in this list, but you never know. Anyway, those packages, and I would like to mention also Yarovaya package. It's a couple of laws that limited our freedom of internet and secrecy of communications. And Russian providers, they must to collect all data since July 2018 of all connection, all sounds, pictures, messages that Russian people do in the country. And we, the customers, we must pay for creation of those database, and all information will be collected from now it's 12 hours, but it will be extended up to 6 months. And all connection information will be collected for 3 years. So we see that shrinking space of freedom of mind, freedom of expression, freedom of association. So it's very difficult for us as lawyers to provide expertise on Russian legislation, to provide commentaries, because if we receive foreign funding, it's not allowed for us even to provide comments, because our NGO that we represent can be immediately put in the list of foreign agent. And this is a trap, so you could not operate with this label, because on Russian language, foreign agent means foreign spy. And this is the game with definition that our authorities is playing. We always say, let's follow rule of law, and they translate it as a rule of legislation. We say foreign agent means exactly foreign spy. They say, no, it's like American FARA law. So it's a difficult situation now in Russia in terms of how we can improve our legislation, even we have no political will to do it.
Do you, I want to circle back to Yashwe and go back to this question about social media as a net positive, and when is it a negative? Because when does it allow for tracking? When does it allow for a government to monitor or persecute using it? Or do you find that in general it's been a net positive? And go back to where you were with this question of human rights lawyers, now that Maria's told us about being a human rights lawyer in Russia.
Yeah, well, the arrival of the internet is something completely new, and something the Chinese government didn't in the early 2000s have experience how to crack down. So there was a period where it really served the situation. Today, when you hear the public opinion of China, and don't believe it, because today the Chinese government manipulates it very well. But if China were in the early 2000s, you will hear so many Chinese people talking about China democratizing. That's the true, talking about universal value. That was the true voice. Today, you don't hear. So don't let anyone tell you that, Chinese all are in favor of their government. That is not true, simply because their voices are taken out now. Now, I want to come back to with the arrival of, so for a period, the Chinese government didn't know what to do. The famous Great Firewall was still in progress at the time. So, but in between 2010 and 2012, there were multiple articles, written speeches by the Chinese propaganda officials they were really, their anxiety over internet really reached a breaking point. They were like, literally, this was their saying, internet is a battle that we're losing to the people. We must do something. If we don't win this battle, the regime will fall, will collapse. You know what? They're right, but they are the party, being the party, having all the resources and the power. They took internet back. We all know where internet in China today is. So. With the human rights, the rights defense movement. The rights defense movement is also a result, a baby of internet, because with the internet, cases are amplified, brought to the national attention, and human rights lawyers fight case by case on freedom of speech, for freedom of religious freedom, and all other cases, and also not just for these political cases, also for economic cases, property rights. They fight for private entrepreneurs, for peasants whose land were taken away but not compensated, and all sorts of cases were fought by the case in the court. And the human rights lawyers with the internet, they were able to take in these cases, working with liberal intellectuals and journalists, and brought them to national attention. And this process worked very well until 2015. It became a model when there was an incident, some of you might not know or may know, it's very reported very widely, called the 709 incident. So that's when on July 9th, 2015, Chinese government arrested, questioned, or kidnapped 300 plus human rights lawyers, rounded them all up within like 48 hours. In the end, they put 20-some into what they called residential surveillance at a designated place. So this term is Chinese government's term for secret detention. Still today, there are a number of human rights lawyers still not tried or not released. So, and also at the same time, I'm talking about now. Chinese are issuing government Justice Department and Human Rights Lawyers Association. That's the organization associated with the government, issuing one regulation after another to limit the activities of human rights lawyers, what you can do. You cannot talk about your case on social media. You must report your case to the Justice Department, and human rights lawyers, and recently several of them are being disbarred on just the one piece of notice, taking their livelihood away. So that's where we are. Chinese government has been seal the cracks, plug the holes, and is bringing everything to a stop. That's where we are. Hopefully I answered your questions, or if you want to ask more.
I have many more, but Marcia, let's look at this question of what it means to be outside and inside. And obviously, I'm curious if you can turn again to the most recent protests and this incredibly symbolic image of a woman standing with her, waving her hijab, and it becomes the most iconic picture of it. What fueled the protest? Talk to us a little bit about what fueled the most recent protests and where you think women picked up the mantle of them.
You know, I think she didn't answer your question. I'm not going to do this. Because I really want to look at the other side, that when people take the street and risk their lives, when these women take the street and put themselves in danger, why these all protests are being oppressed, and suddenly the word here that, okay, we have another election. So where are these people gone? What happened to these people, you know? These are really important that I really want to mention about it.
Do you feel that when we make national agreements, I mean, one thing that Yashua and I spoke about on the phone earlier this week was during the 90s when China had to debate most favored status, and during previous administrations when we brought up human rights yearly, what impact did that have or not have? And I am curious about where large international agreements have an impact on human rights.
Exactly, that's the question. But I'm going to give you an example. What happened to those women who protest against compulsory hijab? First of all, let me tell you, because in the West now hijab is trendy. In the West, when you talk about hijab, it can be a sign of resistance, and that is why you are being ignored if you talk about compulsory hijab and you fight against compulsory hijab. But I want to break this taboo and say that all we are hearing, it's wrong information in the West and actually helping the government in Iran and other countries in the Middle East to oppress women. How? Look, in Iran protest, there was a woman became the most visible symbol of the protest, holding headscarf in public, and none of the media in the West talked about it. Why? Because now they don't want to be associated with Donald Trump campaign. Now the government of Iran actually using this situation in the West. So when people getting attacked, getting lashes, getting into prison, and getting beaten up in public by protesting against compulsory hijab and women's rights abuse, in the West, women, media, feminists, politicians, they don't want to talk about it. And these are linked together. That is why I wanted to talk about it. Because when people in Iran putting themselves in danger and talking about a discriminatory law, at the same day we see the member of European Parliament are in Iran visiting the government of Iran, 3 ministers from Netherlands. At the same time when they were obeying compulsory hijab and meeting the president of Iran, that woman got arrested in public, in the street, protesting compulsory hijab. And I myself sent a letter to the High Representative of European Parliament and the Western feminists. And I asked them, why you keep silent when you see that women are getting arrested by challenging a discriminatory law, and you actually at the same time legitimizing that discriminatory law? You know what they say? They say that this is an internal matter. That is why we don't want to get involved. But it's a big lie, because it's about the female politician who go and visit the government of Iran. It's not about us. So we don't actually ask them to come and interfere in internal matter. It's exactly the same when our government, the female politician, come to the United States of America. I met them actually in the United Nations, and I went there and I asked the vice president of Iran, I said, if you are forced to take off your hijab in United Nations, what would be your reaction? Of course you protest, but you force the other female politician to wear hijab. What is their reaction? They say it's a cultural matter and we don't want to interfere. So in my opinion, any protest happening in Iran and people putting themselves in danger, and right now they are in prison. 29 women who protested against compulsory hijab right now are in prison. When this movement kept silent and the government of Iran can oppress them, actually, the Western media and the Western female politicians, especially the European Parliament, the member of European Parliament, helping them to do that. So these are totally linked together.
It seems to me that what you're articulating, though, is 2 different cultural implications that are happening in 2 different places. In the United States and in Europe, there is a debate over religious pluralism and the right to religious expression.
Exactly.
Which is different. And it
so
is,
no, let me clear that I am supporting freedom of choice, but the most important thing is the hypocrisy actually helping the dictator in the Middle East. Like when burkini ban happened or travel ban happened in United States of America, we all took the street and protest against Muslim ban. I myself, I'm a victim of Muslim ban, visa ban. I cannot see my son who lives in England. But the thing is, at the same time, when I invite all those feminists to join Iranian women inside Iran to condemn compulsory hijab, they kept silent and they went actually Iran and visited the government of Iran by obeying compulsory hijab.
I hesitate to put a label on all Western feminists or all Western politicians. Let me pause you.
Yeah, sure.
Because before we take the entire panel for this, though I think it's fascinating, and I think what you're articulating is rights for two different types of freedoms that are facets that are important to address, but are not necessarily always in competition. But one problem that you may be also articulating without quite explicitly stating is that it is not always welcome when Westerners get involved in internal matters, which Maria might be able to articulate well for us.
Because
wait,
I didn't understand internal matter.
I'm going to give Maria a moment.
Sure.
Because when foreign groups and foreign outside groups have gotten involved in Russia, it has not necessarily aided those NGOs. And I'd rather Maria articulate that a little bit, the ways in which that can cause complications for activists on the ground in country. I'm not denying the point that you're making. I just want to kind of broaden it back out to the people on the panel.
Thank you, Sarah, for your question. As I understood, you asked me about is it free to continue our work in Russia or outside of Russia? And I would like to say that for last 2-3 years, a lot of activists, they left country because we have no mass pressure on Russian civil society activists, but they choose some people, and you never know if they will follow you or not. And if they open criminal cases or they started some procedures, it's better to leave country immediately. And as I mentioned before, we got a lot of laws that are implemented on the head of NGO. So ordinary staff, they can still really freely operate in Russia, but they would like to follow directors, head, or members of the board of those associations, because they don't want them to continue their work in Russia. That's why people left the country, and this is the reality, and they continue their struggle outside of Russia. There are a lot of free space, for example, still in Georgia, still in Lithuania, in the US, and people continue their work. But anyway, everybody cannot leave Russia, so we must, support everyone who is staying and who is fighting for democracy. And probably this will be continue, till 2024 or even 2030. So we should wait for the window of opportunity. We should collect and continue to educate our people, educate ourselves, and to to protect all let's say human capital that we got for last 15 years for last 25 years after collapse of USSR. We should keep all this till the window of opportunity will come for us. And we got the election last Sunday, and there is no doubt who is the winner. So they will continue their policy on pressure on civil society and people who would like to do some changes in Russia.
I need to open this up to questions. Each of you deserve your own panels, and I don't mean to cut anybody off, but I do need to open it up to questions. The woman here in the scarf.
Should I just stand up and talk?
Sure.
Hi, Ilhan Kagri from the Muslim Public Affairs Council. First, I want to thank everybody, and also I want to say Happy New Year to Masih.
Yes, thank you so much.
Because the Iranians very reasonably celebrate New Year's on exactly the point of the vernal equinox, which makes a lot more sense than our New Year. I'd like to also explain, I work for an NGO that deals with the rights for American Muslims. And I want to just explain what Masih was trying to say, or at least what I think she was trying to say. Or as one Iranian, I once heard him say, it's like, if she wasn't trying to say this, she should have been trying to say this. And that is that there is such a degree of Islamophobia in the United States right now that, people are waiting to pounce on it. Mm-hmm. So what happens is that even if Muslims agree with the movement in Iran, if American Muslims take a stand on that, then anti-Islamic forces in the United States are going to pounce on that. And so it's a very, very dangerous and slippery slope for people in the United States who are concerned about the Islamophobia going on in this country. And it doesn't matter whether you're Muslim or not. It's very, very difficult to support a movement in Iran that is, that may be deemed to be against Islam. It's not, but may be deemed to be against Islam, so that people who are enemies of Islam or enemies of actually any minority in this country.
I think Marcia made this point really nicely, actually, and I think she
I can't even make it nicer.
Okay, no, I don't mean to cut you off, but I know there are a number of
I
people
want to
in the room.
ask my question too. So
Okay,
let me
go
ask
ahead.
my question, and then you
Sure.
can answer to both. So the second question I have is this. So what I think is really sad for me in societies where you get so much oppression that societies break up into two camps, and you can't seem to take advantage of reasonable thinkers on either side of the camp. And so one of the things that's happening that I'd like to ask you is, in Iran, are there not, or is there a movement, or is there a way to reach out to the religious people, to the ulama? So for example, Sistani said hijab is not required. Quran does not say hijab is required, anybody who reads the Quran. And so I'm wondering if there is, rather than throwing out the baby with the bathwater, which unfortunately a lot of Iranians have done and said, Islam is all crap, and
Let's let Marcia
Yeah.
answer, just because we only have 6 minutes for questions.
That's a really
I appreciate
good question. Look, in Iran, anytime when you want to talk about human rights abuse in the West, the government of Iran using that to say that, you see, we told you that in the West they don't respect Muslim. So when Burkini ban happened, when travel ban happened, I never said that I'm not going to talk about it because the government of Iran might take advantage. So now you think that because of the Islamophobia, we have to keep silent. This is wrong. Defending human rights never make you look Islamophobic. Why? When the Western feminists, Swedish feminists, published a picture of themselves mocking Donald Trump cabinet by publishing a picture of all female cabinet, we all say that this is great. I myself wrote an article and I said, this is amazing. But 1 month later, they went to Iran and all of them obeyed hijab, wearing compulsory hijab in front of the president. I said, okay, wait a minute. If you're a true feminist, then you have to stand up for women's rights and equality everywhere. Doesn't matter whether it happens in United States of America or in Islamic Republic of Iran. By first picture, you were trying to say men and women are equal. By the second picture in Islamic Republic of Iran, you said that so men are not more equal than women. And I grew up in a poor family. Anytime when I wanted to talk about my right, I was just being silent, saying that this is not the right time because bread and money is important than women's right. Then it was war. Then it was revolution. There were so many bigger problems. You were talking about why you don't have the right to choose what you want to wear. So we had to talk about bigger problems. Then we had war. 2 of my brothers were injured during the war. Both of them. And then my mom and the government was saying that we have war. You're talking about why women doesn't have the right to ride a bicycle? You're talking about women, why we are not allowed to dance? It's war. And then after we had sanction. And people were saying, because of sanction, the West might take advantage if you're talking about women's rights abuse in Iran. And now I am coming from the Middle East, carrying all these wounds and scars of war, revolution, sanction, everything with me. And people here saying that, Islamophobia, so Donald Trump is around, keep silent. That breaks my heart, that anytime I want to talk about women's rights, people say, it's not the right time. No, it is a right time. I launched a campaign. I called all the Muslim women who wear hijab. My dream is to walk with my mother who wears hijab, shoulder to shoulder, in France, in Iran. Not my mom getting, bad look from those people who have Islamophobia, not me getting arrested and beaten up. But my mom gets support in the West. I don't. Why? I deserve to get support because there are 29 people are in prison. And I had a debate with Linda Sarsour, and she said, actually, you're my sister, I support freedom of choice. I said, how come I'm your sister right now? I'm talking to you. If I am your sister, you have to be loud. When I go to your Twitter page, I don't see anything that you condemn compulsory hijab. That breaks my heart. Otherwise, we are not causing Islamophobia. These are all the Sharia laws causing Islamophobia. These are actually, I don't ask the Western feminists to keep and to come and save us. I want to save the Western feminists, to make them understand that when we talk about the discriminatory law, it doesn't make you Islamophobic. There, like Iranian women inside Iran, talk about it loud. When you condemn burkini ban, travel ban, you have to condemn compulsory hijab. It's about us. It's about keeping sisterhood. It's not about internal matter. Some of the Western feminists actually say that, you know, we don't want to break the law when we go to Iran. Slavery used to be legal. You have to break a bad law and make it a respectable law. That's all I'm trying to say.
That was well articulated. Can I have another question?
Russia, when church is an institution, somehow, some way related with the Russian authorities, they, you know, also shrinking civil space for people who don't support, you know, like traditional religions of Russia. And this is, you know, this is very unfortunate for us, because the extremism article of Russian criminal code, you can be in prison for many years just for nothing, just for expressing your opinion, supporting other religion. And as I mentioned before, so-called Yarovaya package about secrecy of communication and limitation of internet, in this package we also receive a ban of all missionary activity in Russia. So it's very difficult if you are, for example, Baptist, or you are from different religions, to come to Russia and to do what you want to do. And I would like to say that Russian church as an institution also involved in politics. But you know, this is a phenomenon of Russia, because they support, like a Tsar, they support Putin, but anyway, they can support democratic values as well. So they most friendly support authoritarianism, but anyway, they can support human rights values. And we saw it in, you know, in the last couple of years. So we should continue dialogue with the church. We should not cut any relation. We should explain that there is no, you know, border between us, because we share like Christian values of, you know, love each other and do good things. But thank you for your question. This is something that we should think about, and to do more work in this field.
In the front right here.
Okay. Thank you. I'm Sushma Palmer. First, I just want to congratulate the panel. I think it's a great discussion, very inspiring, and you're all doing fantastic work in very difficult situations. And congratulations to Bobby for organizing this, and to Mike and Freedom House for hosting the forum. I think it's fantastic. So a quick comment first on the Iranian situation and what Masi was saying. I think that the whole issue of, you know, resistance to Islam, I think needs to be separated into two. First, I think moderate Muslims, if they could speak up more like Masi is doing and represent their side of the issue, I think there would be much less resistance to Islam in general. That's just sort of my observation. I think part of the Islamophobia comes from fear of Sharia and the extremist elements of Islam. I guess that's perhaps no surprise. Secondly, I think that it would be extremely important I think China, among all these, the three different regions we are discussing here today, that's the most difficult situation because the Chinese government has a much greater hold on sort of world opinion and world politics than Iran or Russia. So I think that's a much bigger challenge, and I congratulate you for focusing and taking on this challenge. Thank you.
I want to take a couple more questions before. One more. Okay, in the back there.
Thank you. Hi, my name is IRA Egan. I come from Mexico. First of all, I want to thank you all of you because of your time, and also because I think all of you have a flame inside that keeps you on moving every day to support this cause. But I think it's really hard to persuade with human rights, with feminism, to be kind of part of a rebellion about the things that are wrong, because even if your cause are the good ones, I think there are every day consequences. So my question is, how can you deal with the idea of doing the right thing sometimes damage yourself or your loved ones?
Yeshua, do you want to?
Oh yeah, well, I must say that unlike these two ladies, they come from from the countries themselves. I'm actually an American citizen living in Washington, D.C. So I don't have any personal experience of paying a high price. But day in, day out, on a daily basis, I do write and talk to people who do pay unbelievable personal prices. And so in China, you apart from throwing you in jail, the government does a set of things that here we can't even begin to imagine. They'll go to your employee to say, if you still hire this person, your business is going to be affected. So the employee will scramble and tell this person, you have to go. They'll go to your landlords to say, you cannot rent your apartment to so-and-so. And landlord, landlady will come right there. No. I gave all your money back. Go. Today you have to leave. Scared. And they go to your relatives, your brothers, sisters, your brother-in-law, sister-in-laws, your parents, everyone, your parents, even your friends. They go to them. They said that you have to talk to so-and-so to stop doing this and write about that. The Chinese, I can go on with a long list, but just to save time. The thing is, Chinese human rights activists and the democracy activists, it takes tremendous courage to do what they do, and very often they do not get support from their families and friends. Families think you are, what on earth are you doing to give us all these pains and trouble, and look at yourself, you ruined yourself. So it's very, very difficult. But the internet, I want to come back very quickly, just a few seconds. Internet also brought people together in wonderful ways. So you have networks of activists. They come together to help each other, raising funds for each other, providing shelters for each other, go to visit each other, having monthly dinner gatherings with each other. So they find families among themselves. So that's the situation. But overall, it's very, very important. I also sit on the board. Overseas, we have organizations providing humanitarian fund. For example, I sit on the board of a San Francisco-based NGO 501c3 called the Humanitarian China that specializes on providing humanitarian helps to dissidents and activists. So Well, since I mentioned it, I may as well advertise it a little bit. So if you want to give, that's a place. Look up Humanitarian China, the website.
So I want to thank this panel for not only giving us, in an incredibly short amount of time, a snapshot of civil society and human rights activism in their countries, but also holding up a mirror to all of us and forcing us, especially in the case of Masya, to think about the ways in which our own complacency and our own contexts alter our perspectives on each of these conflicts and each of these situations. And I wish we had more hours in which to dive into each of these cases, but we are at time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.